Well, today we're looking at the claims that China is profiteering from its vaccines, or that Chinese vaccines are less effective than the rest. We've heard the same accusations before, and we'll surely hear them again. But the fresh finger pointing provides the opportunity to look at what's really going on there. First, the bigger picture. Now, despite global efforts to vaccinate people against COVID-19, cases are still rising in many parts of the world. Over 192 million cases have been reported around the world already, and the death toll has passed 4 million. And according to Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Research Center, devastating new spikes are emerging in countries partially due to the aggressive Delta variant, which has been detected in over 120 countries as of late July. In the U.S., cases are rising in all 50 states compared to 2 weeks ago, and there's been a 145% jump in new reported cases in late July. The U.K. reported over 50,000 new daily coronavirus cases in mid-July, the highest amount since mid-January. Africa recorded a 43% rise in COVID-related deaths as of mid-July, and in Asia, Indonesia has become the new epicenter as new cases surged to around 50,000 a day. Other countries in Asia like Thailand, Bangladesh, and South Korea are also seeing unprecedented spikes. The number of cases linked to the Tokyo Games, which starts Friday, has already reached 91, according to AP. But the point is, the picture is still grim in many corners of the world, and we're not out of the woods yet. But the good news is the vaccinations are also on the rise. Around 3.7 billion doses of vaccinations have been administered across almost 180 countries. And China alone has administered over 1.4 billion doses and counting. Vaccine inequity, however, remains a critical issue, not only for lower-income countries that can't access the number of doses they need, but also for the entire world. Until a certain proportion of the world is vaccinated, new mutations like the Delta variant will keep emerging, against which the vaccines might not be as effective or work at all. Now, we're in a real race against time. And given this reality, it is welcome news that GAVI, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, which co-leads the vaccine sharing initiative COVAX, along with the WHO and other international organizations, just signed deals to purchase vaccines produced by Chinese companies, Sinopharm and Sinovac. Now, both vaccines have been granted emergency use listing by the WHO. So what's the deal? Well, it secures a potential total of 550 million more doses for countries around the world. The agreements will begin to make 110 million doses immediately available to some participants in the program. Now, COVAX has its initial commitment to deliver over 2 billion doses worldwide by the end of 2021. And as of July 22nd, it has delivered 136 million doses to 136 participants. And there's a lot of work yet to be done. And given the severe gap between the number of doses COVAX needs and has, the deal is welcomed not only by COVAX, but by many people around the world. But not everyone sees it this way. A Washington Post opinion post on the story says China's vaccination profiteering at the UN is being funded by U.S. taxpayers. It claims the Chinese government is forcing GAVI to buy its vaccines. Even worse, it says U.S. taxpayers are footing the bill for financing Beijing's scheme. Well, first of all, it's important to understand a few things about how the mechanism actually works. For example, only vaccines approved by the WHO are eligible. Now, GAVI is in charge of managing the COVAX facility, the global procurement mechanism of COVAX, which signs deals and negotiates advance purchase agreements with manufacturers. But before signing deals with the Chinese producers, GAVI already signed purchase deals with 9 manufacturers. And with Sinopharm and Sinovac, that makes 11. So why is China being singled out for profiteering from these deals? And also, it should be noted that China has donated quite a few doses of vaccines to more than 80 developing countries in need, despite being the world's most populous nation with its own high level of demand. In addition to the deal with manufacturers, China announced it will provide an initial 10 million doses to COVAX designated for emergency use in developing countries, of which the first batch officially rolled off the production line not long ago. And as of July, China has provided more than 100 countries and international organizations with 500 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines and concentrates, accounting for 1/6 of the current global COVID-19 vaccine production. Well, none of this information is included in the Washington Post opinion piece, of course. But it gets worse. The opinion piece goes so far as to suggest that China is profiteering from its vaccines and using U.S. taxpayers' money to do so. Well, its logic is that because the U.S. is giving money to GAVI and GAVI is buying vaccinations from China, then U.S. is paying China. But even the opinion piece itself says, well, this isn't really the case. It says, a senior U.S. official told me that it's not actually the U.S. donated money that GAVI, the parent organization of COVAX, is using to pay the Chinese companies. GAVI would not use funds attributable to U.S. contributions to support the Sinopharm and Sinovac procurement. But really, the big question is, if there are safe and affordable vaccines available, should COVAX avoid them simply because they're made in China? Bringing politics into it would just make the pandemic harder to fight. Well, other media are looking at the deal suspiciously too, but focusing on the efficacy issue. CNN, for example, recently published the headline, COVAX signs deal for 550 million Chinese COVID-19 vaccines amid questions over efficacy. The article describes the COVAX deal with Sinopharm and Sinovac, but can't resist planting a seed of doubt over the vaccine's efficacy. It says the announcement comes as Chinese vaccines face growing scrutiny over their efficacy, particularly against the swift-spreading Delta variant. It then cites a few examples like this one. Thai health authorities announced Monday that healthcare workers would receive a booster shot of either AstraZeneca or Pfizer after 618 of more than 677,000 medical personnel who received 2 doses of Sinovac tested positive for COVID-19. And of the 618 who tested positive, only 2 became seriously ill, including 1 nurse who died. But as a quote from a Thai Ministry of Foreign Affairs official who said, despite that all vaccines have been proven to be efficient in preventing hospitalization and death, well, that's sort of a different story than the headline suggests. It also makes you wonder what the numbers of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths would have been without any vaccines. And according to a July report in a medical journal, The Lancet, 2 doses of Sinovac's CoronaVac vaccine offer 83.5% protection against symptomatic COVID-19. The results came from a large-scale randomized control phase 3 trial of the inactivated vaccine involving more than 10,000 participants aged between 18 to 59, conducted in Turkey between September 2020 and January 2021. But it's true that no vaccine is 100% effective, and many of the places seeing recent spikes in cases are using non-Chinese vaccines. For example, although around 2/3 of the UK's adult population are fully vaccinated, over 54,000 new cases were reported on a single day of July 17th. And as if the picture wasn't complicated enough, debates around the origin of the virus are heating up again. The WHO has proposed 5 priorities for the next phase of the investigation into the origin, including further studies in China and lab audits. Now, in response, China's foreign ministry called on the WHO to adhere to the spirit of science, professionalism, and objectivity, and to resist the headwind of politicization. On July 22nd, Zheng Yixin, deputy head of China's National Health Commission, said at a press conference on the COVID-19 origin tracing work that China will not follow the World Health Organization's suggested plan on second phase of coronavirus origin tracing. Zheng noted that the plan indicates the disrespect to common sense and the arrogant attitude toward science. But given the way that some media are reporting on this issue, it seems that they already have their conclusions. Another CNN article quotes Dr. Fauci as saying a recent paper was put out by 21 very well internationally respected virologists and evolutionary biologists who said the same thing as I'm saying. So you've got to keep an open mind to all possibilities, but they feel that the more likely explanation is a natural evolution from an animal host to a human. But then the last paragraph says, current intelligence reinforces the belief that the virus most likely originated naturally from animal to human contact and was not deliberately engineered, the sources said. But that does not preclude the possibility that the virus was accidentally leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where coronavirus research was being conducted on bats, Although many scientists familiar with the research say such a leak is unlikely, well, it is confusing. And Fauci's main argument is that natural origin theory is still the most likely. But then the lab leak theory is brought up again. Why not just let the science speak? Well, our next episode of Headline Buster will go deeper into the topic of origin, tracing of coronavirus. But the other main point here is that the world is in need of more vaccines, no matter which kind or how they're procured. And China has the science and the production capacity to deliver. And when we come back, I'll talk to my guests about why China's arrangement with COVAX has struck a nerve with some and how significant the contribution is as the world keeps battling against the pandemic.
Making sense of the overwhelming wave of information means cutting through the noise to shine a light on the heart of the story and making room for new perspectives. True understanding means the ability to see events from more than one side. I'm Liu Xin, and this is The Point.
Welcome back to Headline Buster. Let me now introduce my awesome panel. We're now joined by Professor Wu Jiwei, Center for Public Health Research Medical School at Nanjing University. Welcome. And Andy Boriam, columnist, filmmaker at Shanghai Daily. Good to see you there, Andy. And also Mr. Cyrus Jansen, senior consultant at APP Marketing Solution, Inc. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's talk about this. First of all, Professor Wu, you're the health expert here, so let me start with you. Explain to us, how does this COVAX program work? I mean, they can sign deals with governments and manufacturers, and doses can be either sold or donated. Is that right? If so, why is China being singled out for selling vaccines?
Well, actually, I think this is, when you're talking about China profiteering from the vaccine into the COVAX program, is more likely actually driven by political reasons. I don't think this is something actually people do think. Basically, this is, is by the Washington Post report. The thing is, if you look at how the COVAX program works, the mechanism basically trying to make sure that all the countries, whether they are wealthy or poor, they get equal access to vaccines. So that's why the UN and COVAX trying to raise funds to support procuring of the vaccines, and various different countries are actually putting their vaccine into the program. So the major receiver of the vaccines are basically the 92 middle to low income countries, and you don't actually make much profit from this vaccine program. If you want to do it, then basically you could do bilateral agreement to sell vaccine to other countries.
Cyrus, your reaction to this? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the most important thing that we need to understand is that when COVAX ordered these vaccines, this is at a time when there was not enough vaccines being developed. There was a huge need for this. And so this is something that, we can't, forget. And so this was an opportunity for them to sign a deal, in order to procure these vaccines, which are needed around the world. And again, this is really what COVAX has established, is to make sure that these vaccines are distributed amongst the most neediest countries in the world. So it doesn't matter if you are a rich country or a poor country, everybody should have equal access to this. And again, this is a global struggle that all of us are in together. So, we really do need to take the politics out of this and just make sure that we're finding the right solutions.
Professor Wu, in terms of vaccine sharing, what kind of role does government play versus manufacturers such as Sinovac or Sinopharm?
Well, actually, I think, for all the companies, actually, the key aim is trying to make profit out of this. You can't expect a company to be a charitable organizations. So why you need the COVAX? Basically, the government actually procure the vaccines all through charitable organizations like COVAX, which actually would usually put down the prices and acceptable level to from those companies. So this is very different from what commercial or the private sectors selling vaccines and the government actually procuring the vaccines. So there is a distinction here.
And we've seen so many articles about, accusing China of using its vaccines as a geopolitical leverage. Andy, how are you looking at this?
Well, actually, I've noticed quite a bit in Western media, this term vaccine diplomacy. I think it's actually quite selectively used. As an example, Australia recently accused China of vaccine diplomacy when China delivered the first dose of donated vaccines to Papua New Guinea, a country to the north of Australia. They said that they were maybe donating those vaccines for some kind of leverage in the area. But then actually within 7 days, New Zealand, my home country, made a similar donation and there was no such claims of vaccine diplomacy. So it seems to be quite selectively enforced. And actually in the US as well, I've noticed they tend to use the term with two meanings, which is quite interesting and confusing as well. So when they say US vaccine diplomacy relating to US donations to South America, for example, they mention the strengthening of US vaccine diplomacy, which is meant to be seen as a good thing by readers and viewers of local media. But when they mention Chinese vaccine diplomacy, it has an altogether different to it. It's meant to be seen as a negative and some kind of meddling or nefarious. So I think it can actually be quite confusing, but I think actually it's probably a good thing in the long run because a bit of healthy competition is going to be good for the whole world. If it takes if it takes China donating vaccines around the world to developing nations for the West to kind of get a kick up the butt and donate more, then that's good for all of us.
And Cyrus, in terms of, vaccine efficacy, why are we still seeing so many spikes, especially in the population that have actually made progress in vaccination? Despite, what kind of vaccine they use, of course.
Well, I think that really just shows us all that, like you had mentioned earlier, there is no vaccine that is 100% effective as far as combating, COVID-19. I mean, you still want to make sure that you're respecting this virus. We do see these new variants coming up. The Delta variant is, spreading around the world as well. So it's just really we just need to really understand, the situation that we're going through. I mean, the best case is that if you do get vaccinated, you most certainly are going to be protected against probably, hospitalization and probably death. But however, there's still risk out there. So we still need to be vigilant. We still need to be, especially here, I'm in Canada right now, and, we have seen, vaccinations have been going up. And as a result, cases have been going down. And we are seeing a slight resurgence again. So we just need to be just vigilant about that and just realize that, it doesn't because you get your double vaccination that you don't have to worry about COVID for the rest of your life. This is something we all need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, that's an important point. Professor Wu, some people do get infected again after being fully vaccinated.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because, if you look at, basically there are three factors here. One is that the vaccination rates are still very uneven. In some countries, actually, particularly in the developed countries, there are very high vaccination rates. And in developed countries, such as in African countries, actually most of them are below 10%. So when the virus actually is still circulating, it is still a pandemic, then basically you can't really stop the virus from going from one country to the others. So that's what we have seen. When China is fully put the virus under control, then basically you can see there's different regional spikes. The other thing is that currently vaccines, most of them actually basically reduce the serious disease and hospitalizations. It doesn't fully protect you from being infected. So that's quite different. The third is that when the virus is still circulating, then you do have the chance to get variants, such as the Delta variants. And you will see that in the future that the virus new mutations will continue to come out.
Yeah, despite all the risk, some countries are relaxing their restrictions and opening up for international travelers. Andy, how are you looking at this?
Well, I think China in that regard is making the right choice with the slowly approach. From the start, China knew how to deal with this situation, which was great. But I think actually opening up borders is not something China will be willing to do for a little while yet. And especially in terms of the Japanese Summer Olympics, you said before there's already 91 cases. They never opened their borders for everybody. They still had just no spectators at events and so on. But I think it's still quite dangerous to be traveling at the moment. So I think even next year for the Winter Olympics in Beijing, China will probably still take the same approach, the slowly more careful approach. And I don't think we'll be seeing relaxation of the borders here anytime soon, because China's border is one of the main strategies, I guess, and why China is doing so well at the moment. And it would be a shame to lose the gains we've made up until now by moving too quickly and relaxing the border. So I don't see a relaxation anytime soon.
That is the question in everybody's mind, right? We're all watching this, as we get close to the Winter Olympics. What kind of approach will Beijing take toward the games? Cyrus, do you think that we are going to see, China relaxing its border when it gets close to the game?
I don't. I think, what we've seen from China really is a fantastic response to COVID-19. I know life in China has been pretty much back to normal for many months now, and COVID has not had to be a tremendous worry as opposed to, here I am in North America. To give you some context, United States and Canada border, one of the largest borders in the world, has been closed for this entire time. They both just announced that they're going to open it next month, and they now have pulled that back and said, no, we need to reconsider this because the Delta variant is really rising. And I think you're going to probably err on the side of caution. The most important thing is to make sure that the Beijing Olympics goes through, that it's a fantastic opportunity for Beijing to make history, hosting, becoming the first city to host both the summer and winter. And I would imagine that China is going to do everything in their power to make sure that they keep that good quality of life. Everybody is living, very comfortably in China right now with the COVID situation, and make sure that these Olympic Games are a success.
Professor Wu, are we going to see a winter game without spectators too, as we've been seeing for the Tokyo Games?
I don't think so, but I wouldn't like want to predict whether this would be fully open up Winter Olympics. But I think it's likely that the audience will be allowed, because we do have extensive experience in the disease control. If you look at in the past years, that we did have a very good handling of the diseases, like Chinese Spring Festivals and a number of major holidays. So basically, we saw is that after the holidays and the Spring Festival, we don't really see huge spikes of the COVID-19. So I think China has been doing pretty well in terms of disease tracing and early identification of the infected, and also those asymptomatic cases. I think this is something that actually gives us the confidence that we do, at least our hopes that there will be partial open up.
And Andy, I do want to talk about, this lab audit. The WHO is calling for a further investigation. How are you looking at the friction when it comes to the investigation regarding the origin of COVID-19 that China is facing?
Well, I think actually at the moment there's much more important things to be concentrating on. As you mentioned before, the world's going through a number of spikes in COVID-19, and we're having struggles with India having enough vaccines to go around, even with situations or groups like COVAX helping out. So I think actually we need to be concentrating on other things at the moment. We need to stick together, stop politicizing the issue, and actually work on getting ourselves out of this situation before we move forward and discovering origins and things like that. I think maybe this situation is something we may never know the full answer to. And I think this kind of politicization does nothing to help the world. So I really hope that we can move on from that, stick together for the time being. We're all in this together. The whole world's affected. And think about that kind of thing a bit later on, I think. It's not the time.
And Professor Wu, these lab leak theories, what can China do to address them?
Well, actually, I fully agree with what Andy said, that we should focus on other more important things. I mean, this lab leaking theory primarily driven by a few politicians in the West. And if you look at a few days ago in the U.S. Senate hearing, the exchange between Rand Paul and Dr. Tony Fauci, and you get a clear idea that some politicians trying to they just they keep lies, and they're trying to keep the topic alive. I mean, this is an unfortunate situation. I think it's very important that we do seriously look at the situation and also believe the science. Let the experts do the job.
Cyrus?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the situation that we have the world's best virologists and doctors and scientists and everybody putting their best resources in. I've read a lot of reports from really top, Western doctors and virologists that really feel that the most probable case is certainly a natural origin. And I think that, and again, I mean, why do we focus on the past? But again, we're looking at, for example, many countries with these new spikes, many countries still needing vaccines. And again, really the world coming together to solve this problem. I would like to also highlight, look at China and, how many vaccines they've donated around the world. It's close to 500 million doses, to over 100 countries around the world. The reason for that is simply because if any country is left susceptible to this virus still, then that still is going to affect everybody else. We live in a very, connected world right now. And I think this is why you see China donating so many vaccines, very similar to when COVID-19 started and China was donating, the PPE, to countries, including my home country, America, that could not source enough PPE. We had to rely on the country of China to send that to us. I mean, let's focus on the solution and let's get through this.
Focus on the solution. Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us. That's Professor Wu Zhiwei from the Center for Public Health Research Medical School at Nanjing University, Andy Boriam, columnist, filmmaker at Shanghai Daily, and last but not least, Cyrus Jansen, Senior Consultant at APP Marketing Solution Inc. Thank you.